Alright guys, today I'll be talking and giving my thoughts on the 2021 college football season so far. I'll be doing this in three parts, the first being my thoughts on the players, the second being my thoughts on the teams, and the last being my predictions for the remainder of the season. I hope you all enjoy, and don't forget to like and share the video, as that helps the channel to grow. Now let's get into the video. Alright, so first I'm going to start with the players. As of the time of me making this video, the Heisman odds have Bryce Young, Kenneth Walker, and Matt Corral at the top three in that order. The reason I say this is because none of these players are far and away the best player in the nation. Let's look at Bryce Young. Right now, he's tied for the 10th most passing yards in the country, the 4th most touchdowns, and the 2nd best QBR. Now, these are good numbers, but they're not exactly Heisman numbers. For example, let's compare these stats to Baker Mayfield's Heisman year stats at this point in the season. In Week 10 of the 2017 season, Baker had 3,559 passing yards and 31 touchdowns, compared to Bryce, who has 3,025 passing yards and 33 passing touchdowns. Now, Oklahoma did run the air raid offense, which gave Baker more passing attempts and opportunities, but it's still a pretty noticeable difference. Now let's move on to Kenneth Walker. Right now, I think that Kenneth Walker has the best stats in the country and is most deserving of the Heisman. He currently has 1,473 rushing yards, which is the most in the country, and 17 rushing touchdowns, which is tied for most in the country. For reference, let's compare his numbers to the 2009 Heisman winner, Mark Ingram. After Week 10, Mark had 1,297 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns. However, he had about 30 less carries than Kenneth has. But if we compare Kenneth's numbers to the stats of Derrick Henry, who was the last running back to win the Heisman, we find that Derrick had better numbers but also had roughly 10 more carries than Kenneth. So all in all, we can see that Kenneth's numbers are right there with the last two running backs to win the Heisman, which is why I think he's most deserving of it right now. Moving on to Matt Corral, at this point in the season, he has 2,774 passing yards, which is 15th in the nation, 17 touchdowns, which is tied for 31st in the nation, and has a QBR of 81.2, which is 9th in the nation. These are all mediocre passing numbers, but the reason he's on the list is because he's also added 523 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns along with his passing numbers. I've decided to compare his stats with those of Johnny Manziel. After Week 10 of the 2012 season, Johnny Manziel had 2,780 passing yards and 18 passing touchdowns, along with 1,014 rushing yards and 15 rushing touchdowns. Now, Johnny Manziel is one of the best and most exciting players we've ever seen and probably will ever see for a very long time. So it's hard to compare these numbers, but the fact that these numbers are just so different for two guys who play in the same conference and have a lot in common, I think is evidence enough of why Matt Corral is just another mediocre Heisman candidate. Alright, so now I'm going to move on to the teams. As most of y'all know, Georgia is far and away the best team in the country this year. They've outscored their opponents 387 to 76. They've shut out two of their opponents, and 4 teams they've played haven't even scored a touchdown. Needless to say, I think that they have the best chance of winning the championship. Kirby Smart has done a great job this year, and his defense is one of the best I've ever seen. Moving on to Alabama, which is the team we have in the second spot, I think this is a good ranking for them, and as we know, Alabama is not as good this year as they've been in years past. Even though they've only lost one game, they had a close call against Florida and LSU. They also don't have the defense which they've been known for many years. Bryce Young, on the other hand, has done great in his first year starting, as he has 3,025 passing yards right now, which is 12th in the nation. For his first year starting as a sophomore in the SEC, he's done pretty good. I think that Alabama's problem lies in their rushing game. They have roughly more than 1,600 team rushing yards this year, which doesn't even rank in the top 50 among college football. They also only have around 20 rushing touchdowns, which barely ranks in the top 50. About their defense, even though it's not as dominant this year as it has been in the past, it's still really good. They've allowed the 3rd least rushing yards and the 34th least passing yards in all of college football, which is really respectable. Basically, I think that Alabama definitely has a shot at winning the championship. However, they're just not as good as they've been in the past. Looking at other teams, we have Cincinnati ranked number 3, which I think is a little too high for them. There are two sides to this argument, with one being that they don't have as hard of a schedule as the other teams in the SEC or Big Ten, which means they shouldn't be ranked as high as those teams. But on the other side of that coin, you can argue that it's not Cincinnati's fault that they don't play as hard of teams as the Alabamas and the Georgias. They've beaten every team they've played, including a very respectable Notre Dame team, and as a program, that's all you can do. They could not have done any better than they are doing right now. Personally, I think that Cincinnati deserves a spot in the playoff, but not as the number 3 team. I'd say the number 4 team. The final team I'm going to talk about is the Oregon Ducks, who are ranked number 4 right now. Honestly, I think both Oregon and Ohio State both have an argument for the 4th ranking. Both teams have lost to an average team, but besides that, they've both done really well. I won't talk much on these teams, but I can easily see either of them taking the 4th spot in the college football playoff or even the 3rd spot. So now for my predictions. I think that Georgia will easily beat whoever the 4th seed is just because they're that good, so not much to say about that game. Although I do think it would be closer if Ohio State played them opposed to Oregon, but we'll see. The 2 and 3 seed game I think will be the game to watch. Alabama will most likely stay the number 2 team, but I don't know about Cincinnati. Cincinnati could be in the college football playoff or they could not be. That's one of those decisions that only the playoff committee will know. Anyway, whoever the 3rd seed is will probably play Alabama, and it's probably either going to be Oregon, Ohio State, or maybe Cincinnati. In my opinion, Alabama is better than all of these teams, but you never know what can happen. Which means that I think we'll have a rematch of the 2018 National Championship between the Crimson Tide and Georgia. But this time around, obviously Alabama will probably be the underdog, and Georgia will be the favorite. But either way, I'm excited to see that game if those are the 2 teams that it comes down to. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this one. Remember to like and share the video if y'all enjoyed it, as that helps the channel to grow. Besides that, until next time.